She mocked me for selling my company. Great, now afford alimony. I signed everything. 1 hour later, her attorney was screaming. I transferred it all to an overseas charity. She's excluded forever. And that apartment she rents? She pays me monthly and has no idea. My name is Marshall Kincaid. I'm 47 years old, and I own a firm specializing in international trade and customs compliance. It's not glamorous work, but it's lucrative and necessary. Companies that move goods across borders need people like me to make sure they don't end up on the wrong side of federal regulations. I built the business from scratch over 22 years, back when I was still green enough to think hard work and dedication were all you needed. I met Diana 15 years ago at a charity auction in Baltimore. She was recently divorced, raising 2 young boys on her own. Brandon was 4, Zachary was barely 1. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room. I fell hard and fast. Within a year, we were married, and I'd adopted her sons. Not legally at first, but in every way that mattered. I was at every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, every emergency room visit when Zachary broke his arm learning to skateboard. Their biological father, Jeremy Walsh, was supposed to be out of the picture. Diana painted him as an unreliable addict who had walked away from his family for drugs and freedom. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, and those boys became my sons. I paid for their private school tuition, their braces, their college funds. I taught Brandon to drive. I helped Zachary with his calculus homework at midnight when he was crying from frustration. My own father died 3 years into our marriage. He was a hard man, built from old steel and firm handshakes. Before he passed, he pulled me aside at the hospital and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "Marshall," he said, his voice rough in the tubes, "those boys aren't your blood, but they're your responsibility now. You treat them right, you hear me?" I nodded. "But don't be a fool," he continued. "Protect what you build. Not everyone loves you for the right reasons." I thought he was just being cynical, jaded by his own failed marriage to my mother decades earlier. So when he offered to set up trust funds for Brandon and Zachary, $500,000 each, accessible at 21, I agreed, but I made sure the terms were ironclad. I would serve as trustee. I would have full discretionary control until they came of age. And if it was ever proven that Diana had used the boys as tools for manipulation or financial gain, the funds would be dissolved and redirected to scholarship programs. My father smiled when I told him that detail. "Smart boy," he said. "You're learning." He died 2 weeks later. Now, 15 years into this marriage, Brandon is 19 and finishing his freshman year at Penn State. Zachary is 16, a junior in high school with a wicked sense of humor and a talent for graphic design. They're good kids, great kids, and I love them like they're my own blood, because in every way that counts, they are. But lately, Diana has changed. Or maybe she's just stopped pretending. It started about 2 years ago. Subtle at first. Coming home later from her book club, taking calls in the other room, passwords appearing on devices that never had them before. I'm not the jealous type, so I gave her space. Trusted her. Figured marriage has its ebbs and flows, and we'd weather whatever this was. Then 6 months ago, I found a credit card statement she'd left in her car. Charges at hotels I'd never stayed at. Restaurants and cities I'd never visited with her. When I asked about it, she had explanations ready. Girls' weekends, work conferences for her branding consultancy business that never quite took off. I let slide. Again. But something my father said kept echoing in my head. Protect what you build. So I started building. Not walls exactly, but frameworks. Legal structures. Protections that even I didn't fully explain to myself at the time. I told myself it was just smart business. Estate planning. Asset protection in case the regulatory climate shifted. Deep down, though, I knew. I knew the same way you know when a storm is coming. You can feel in the air, even before the first drop falls. The dinner table felt like a courtroom. Diana sat across from me, stabbing at her salad with more aggression than the greens deserved. Her phone lay face up beside her plate for once. A calculated move, I realized. She wanted me to see she had nothing to hide. The irony almost made me laugh. "So," Diana said, not looking up, "Victor tells me you're finally selling the firm." Victor, her divorce attorney, the man who'd been handling her consultation for the past 3 months. I took a sip of water, watching her over the rim of my glass. "News travels fast," I replied. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He keeps me informed. You know about options. My options. I set the glass down carefully. I'm sure he does. This is good timing, actually, Diana continued, her fork finally still. I mean, you've been holding on to that company like some kind of security blanket. Maybe now you can finally afford to do the right thing. The right thing. Alimony, Marshall. She said it like she was explaining basic math to a child. You know, support your wife when this marriage finally ends. Which we both know it will. There it was. Not even pretending anymore. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the document I'd been carrying for 2 weeks. The sale agreement. 43 pages of legal text that Diana would never read, would never understand. I uncapped my pen, a Mont Blanc she'd given me for our 5th anniversary, back when gifts still meant something. You're right, I said quietly. It's time. I signed the final page. My signature looked steady, controlled. Exactly how I felt. Diana's smile widened. Look at you, being mature for once. Victor said you'd fight this tooth and nail, but I knew better. You're not stupid, Marshall. You know when you're beaten. I slid the document back into my briefcase. Do I? She laughed, that sharp, brittle sound she'd developed over the past year. God, you're finally selling your precious company. Great. Now you can actually afford to take care of me the way you should have all along. I stood up, straightening my tie. I signed the papers, Diana. Just like you wanted. Smart move, she said, already reaching for her phone. Victor's going to be thrilled. He said this was going to take months of litigation, but you just saved us all the trouble. I nodded slowly. I'm sure he'll have thoughts about it. She was already typing, her thumbs flying across the screen. I could see the message preview. He signed everything. Call me. I walked to my study and closed the door. On my desk sat another folder, the real documentation, the trust restructuring, the offshore licensing agreements, the charitable foundation paperwork that made every asset untouchable by divorce proceedings. My phone buzzed. A text from my attorney in Zurich. Transfer complete. Foundation active. She has no legal standing. I checked my watch. Diana would get the call from Victor in approximately 45 minutes. Once his paralegal reviewed the documents I'd actually signed. Not a sale to a competitor or private equity firm. A complete transfer to an irrevocable educational trust, with Diana specifically excluded as a beneficiary under the marital dissolution clause. In the next room, I could hear Diana laughing on the phone with someone. Probably Victor. Probably celebrating her impending windfall. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and sat down to wait. The screaming would start soon enough. I was on my second bourbon when I heard Diana's phone ring in the kitchen. The ringtone, some upbeat pop song she'd downloaded, cut through the silence like our alarm bell. I checked my watch. 42 minutes. Victor's paralegal was efficient. Victor, hey. Diana's voice was bright, cheerful. I was just about to text you again. He actually signed everything without a fight. Can you believe it? I thought. She stopped mid-sentence. I stood up, moved closer to my study door, left it open just enough. What do you mean it's not a sale? Her voice had shifted, confusion creeping in. Victor, I saw the documents. He signed them right in front of me. Transfer agreement, everything. Silence. I could picture Victor on the other end, probably pacing his downtown office, trying to figure out how to explain that he'd been outmaneuvered by the client he'd been dismissing as emotionally exhausted for months. A trust. Diana's voice rose. What kind of trust? More silence. Educational foundation? What does that even... Victor, speak English. Where's the money? I took another sip of bourbon. Smooth. 20-year-old Pappy Van Winkle. A gift from a client after I'd saved his company $3 million in penalty fees. Diana always said I wasted money on expensive liquor. Said I couldn't tell the difference anyway. She was wrong about that too. Liechtenstein. Diana's voice had gone shrill now. Why the hell is anything in Liechtenstein? Victor, you said this would be straightforward. You said. She stopped again. When she spoke next, her voice was barely controlled. What do you mean I'm excluded? That's my husband's company. We've been married 15 years. That's community property. Victor, you told me. Another pause. Longer this time. A clause from when? Her voice broke slightly. 3 years ago. What document? I never signed. And there it was. The moment she remembered. The tax optimization papers I brought home. The ones she'd signed while watching her reality show, barely glancing at the highlighted tabs. The ones that included a very specific marital waiver clause buried in Section 12, subsection 4. "I need to call you back," Diana said, her voice hollow. I heard her phone clatter onto the counter. Then footsteps. Fast, purposeful. My study door flew open. Diana stood in the doorway, her face pale except for 2 spots of red high on her cheeks. Her hands were shaking. "What did you do?" she asked. I swirled the bourbon in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "I signed the papers, Diana. Just like you wanted. Victor says there's no money. He says everything went into some trust in Europe. He says I have no claim to any of it. That's accurate." "Accurate?" Her voice rose. "Marshall, that's our money. Our assets. You can't just—" "It's not our money," I interrupted, my voice calm. "It was never our money. It was my company, restructured into a charitable educational foundation. Completely legal. Completely binding. You set me up." I stood, setting my glass down carefully. "No, Diana. I protected what I built. There's a difference. I'll sue. Victor will." "Victor will do nothing," I said, "because there's nothing to sue for. The foundation owns everything. It's governed by an independent board in Zurich. Any attempts to challenge it trigger penalty clauses that would take years to litigate and cost more in legal fees than you'd ever recover." She stared at me like I was a stranger. "When did you become this person?" "When you stopped being my wife," I replied. "I just didn't announce it." Diana didn't leave the kitchen that night. I could hear her on the phone, first with Victor, then with someone else, then Victor again. Her voice oscillated between rage and desperation, each call shorter than the last. I went to bed around 11. She was still pacing, still calling, still trying to find an angle that didn't exist. The next morning, I found her at the kitchen table, laptop open, surrounded by printed documents. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked up when I entered. "I found something," she said. Her voice was hoarse. I poured myself coffee. "Did you? These documents you had me sign 3 years ago. Victor says they're binding, but I was under duress. Emotional manipulation. I didn't understand what I was signing." "You signed them while watching Real Housewives," I said. I remember specifically. Teresa had just flipped the table. "You laughed and said, 'Just tell me where to sign. I'm not missing this.'" Her jaw tightened. "That doesn't make it legal." "Actually, it does. You had ample opportunity to read them. I even suggested you have your own attorney review them. You declined." She slammed the laptop shut. "Why are you doing this? What's the endgame here, Marshall? To punish me?" I sat down across from her, holding my coffee mug with both hands. "I'm not punishing you, Diana. I'm just not rewarding you anymore." "For what?" "For wanting out of a marriage that's been dead for years. For using our sons as props," I said quietly. "For planning to take everything I built while contributing nothing. For sleeping with your divorce attorney and thinking I wouldn't find out." Her face went white. "I don't know what you're—" "Diana." I pulled out my phone, opened a folder, and slid it across the table. "I have 12 months of credit card statements. Hotel rooms. Restaurants. 3 different cities where you had legal consultations that lasted entire weekends." She looked at the screen, then back at me. "You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. This is insane. You're insane." I took a sip of coffee. "Victor's married, by the way. Did you know that? 32 years. 3 kids. I'm sure his wife will find these receipts very interesting. Especially the ones from the Ritz-Carlton, where you both charge room service under his law firm's corporate account." Diana's hands were trembling now. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you," I said. "That's the point. I want nothing from you. No drama. No litigation. No false accusations. You walk away with your personal belongings, your car, and whatever's in your business account. I keep everything else. That's not fair. Life rarely is." I stood up. "But here's what is fair, Brandon and Zachary. They get to choose where they want to live while we sort this out. No pressure from either of us. No manipulation. They're old enough to decide. They'll choose you," she said bitterly. "You've been buying their loyalty for years." "I've been raising them," I corrected. "There's a difference." I walked to the door, then paused. "Victor's going to call you back in about an hour. He's going to recommend you accept the settlement I'm offering. He's going to tell you that fighting this will cost you everything and gain you nothing. Listen to him, Diana. For once, just listen." Brandon came home from Penn State 3 days later. I hadn't called him. Diana had, spinning some version of events that made her the victim and me the villain. I was in the garage, working on the vintage Mustang I'd been restoring for the past 2 years, when I heard his truck pull into the driveway. He found me under the hood, adjusting the carburetor. "Dad," he said. I looked up. He was taller than me now, broader in the shoulders. "When had that happened?" "Brandon. Didn't expect you home mid-semester. Mom called. Said you guys were splitting up. Said you screwed her over financially." He leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "Figured I should hear your side." I wiped my hands on a rag, straightened up. "Your mother's not wrong about the splitting up part. The rest is more complicated. She said you had money. Put everything in some trust overseas where she can't touch it." "Also not wrong," I said. "But the timeline matters, Brandon. I didn't hide assets to punish her. I protected them because I knew this was coming." He studied me for a long moment. "She's been cheating on you." It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, with her divorce attorney. For about a year, maybe longer." Brandon looked away, jaw tight. "I saw them together last summer, at that restaurant near campus. She told me she was visiting for Parents' Weekend, but you weren't there. And this guy was with her. They were holding hands." My chest tightened. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I hoped I was wrong," he said quietly. "Because I didn't want it to be true. Because she's my mom, and you're my dad, and I didn't want to be the one who blew everything up." I set down the wrench I'd been holding. "Brandon, you're not responsible for your mother's choices. Or mine." "I know." He pushed off the workbench. "But I need to ask you something. The trust funds Grandpa set up for me and Zach. Mom says you're going to take them away." "That's not accurate," I said. "Your fund is yours. You turned 19 last month, so legally you can access it whenever you want. Zach's is protected until he's 21. But there are conditions, right? Something about Mom using us as leverage." I sighed. "Your grandfather was a cautious man. He built in protections in case anyone tried to manipulate you boys for money. That's all." Brandon nodded slowly. Then he said, "I want to stay with you during all this. Not because of the money. Because you've been showing up for me since I was 4 years old. You taught me to drive. You helped me pick a college. You didn't have to do any of that." "I wanted to," I said, my voice rough. "I know. That's why I'm choosing you." He glanced toward the house. "Zach's going to choose you too. He told me last night on the phone. He said Mom's been different the past couple years. Distant. Like we were just props for her Instagram." I didn't know what to say to that. "There's something else," Brandon continued. "Mom told me my biological father was dead. Overdosed when I was 3. That's what she told me too. But last week, Zach found him on Facebook. Jeremy Walsh. Lives in Indianapolis. He's a contractor. Married. Has 2 other kids. Very much alive." The garage felt suddenly smaller. "Did you contact him?" "No. But Zach did. Sent him a message." Brandon met my eyes. He responded, "Dad. Said he's been looking for us for years. Said Mom told him if he ever tried to contact us, she'd file restraining orders and claim abuse." I sat down on the workbench stool. "Jesus. So yeah," Brandon said, "I'm staying with you. Because whatever you did to protect your assets, it's nothing compared to what she did to us." Diana's successful podcast had been her pride and joy for 2 years. Empowered Living with Diana had 53,000 subscribers, mostly women who listened to her weekly episodes about marriage, self-care, and finding your authentic voice. She charged $20 a month for premium content, ran ads, and occasionally did sponsor posts for wellness brands. What she didn't know was that her producer, a guy named Seth who she'd stiffed on payment 3 times, hated her guts. I'd contacted Seth a week ago, explained the situation, offered to pay him everything Diana owed him, plus a bonus. All he had to do was schedule 1 special episode. He'd agreed immediately. The episode went live on Thursday morning. The title, When the Empowerment Coach Gets Exposed, a Special Investigation. I was in my office when Diana's phone started ringing. Then her email started pinging. Then her social media accounts lit up like a Christmas tree. I heard her office door slam open. What the hell is this? I looked up from my computer. She was holding her phone, her face red, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You need to be more specific," I said calmly. "The podcast. Someone hacked my podcast and posted. They posted." She couldn't finish. "Posted what, Diana?" "Audio recordings. Of me. Talking to Victor. About the divorce. About the money. About..." She stopped, her voice breaking. "How did you get those recordings?" "I didn't," I said. "Your producer did. Turns out when you record your podcast remotely, The system captures everything, including what you say before and after you stop the official recording. Her hand was shaking. This is illegal. Actually, it's not. You signed a release when you started the podcast. Gave Seth permission to use any audio capture during sessions. You probably should have read that contract. She sank into the chair across from my desk. They heard everything. Everything, I confirmed, including the part where you called your subscribers naive idiots who pay for my lifestyle. That was particularly memorable. You did this. No, you did this. I just made sure the truth came out. I leaned back in my chair. How many unsubscribed so far? She looked at her phone. 42,000. Ouch. That was my income, Marshall. That podcast was how I made money. I agreed. Past tense. She looked up at me, mascara running down her face. Why are you being so cruel? Cruel would be making you listen to it, I said. I'm just letting consequences play out naturally. You build a brand on authenticity while lying to everyone, including yourself. That brand just collapsed. Not because of me, because it was never real to begin with. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it, then let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Victor just texted. He's withdrawing as my attorney. Says the publicity makes it impossible to represent me. Smart man, I said. Probably worried about his own marriage once his wife hears those recordings. Diana stood up, unsteady. I hate you. No, you don't, I said quietly. You hate that you got caught. There's a difference. She left my office without another word. I heard her car start 5 minutes later, tires squealing as she pulled out of the driveway. My phone buzzed. Text from Brandon. Just listen to the podcast. Holy shit, Dad. She really said that about her subscribers? I replied, she really did. Another text. I'm definitely staying with you. Zach too. We decided. I stared at that message for a long time. Something tight and painful loosening in my chest. Thanks, son. That means more than you know. Victor Langley's career ended on a Tuesday morning in the third-floor conference room of the Maryland State Bar Association. I wasn't there in person, but I made sure the right people received the right documentation. The evidence was comprehensive. 12 months of hotel receipts charged to his firm's corporate account while billing Diana for legal consultation at $300 an hour. Emails discussing strategy sessions that were really weekend getaways. Text messages that would make a sailor blush, sent during office hours while he was supposed to be in depositions. But the real killer was the conflict of interest. Victor had represented Diana in her first divorce 15 years ago, the one where she left Jeremy Walsh. Turns out, the affair had started back then too. Victor had deliberately prolonged those proceedings, running up billable hours while sleeping with his client. That was a career-ending violation all by itself. I got the call from my attorney around noon. Langley's been disbarred, he said, effective immediately. He can't practice in Maryland, Virginia, or D.C. The ethics committee hit him with every violation in the book. What about his firm? I asked. They terminated him this morning, escorted out by security. His name's already off the website. My attorney paused. His wife filed for divorce an hour ago. She's not messing around either. Froze all their accounts, filed for sole custody of their kids, and apparently she's friends with 3 different judges. Karma's efficient, I said. Marshall, this is brutal even by divorce standards. You sure you want to go this hard? I thought about Diana's podcast calling her subscribers idiots, about her planning to take everything I'd built, about her lying to Brandon and Zachary about their father for 15 years. I'm sure, I said. That evening, Diana showed up at the house. I was in the kitchen making dinner, spaghetti carbonara, Brandon's favorite. He and Zachary were upstairs doing homework. Victor's been disbarred, Diana said from the doorway. Her voice was flat, empty. I stirred the pasta. I heard. His wife left him. His firm fired him. His reputation is destroyed. She stepped into the kitchen. You did this. No, Diana. He did this. I just made sure the state bar knew about it. I tested a noodle, decided it needed another minute. You chose a man who was willing to betray his professional ethics, his marriage vows, and his law firm. That's not my fault. He was going to help me. He was going to help himself to your settlement. I corrected. Guys like Victor don't do anything out of altruism. He saw dollar signs and an easy mark. She leaned against the counter, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. What happens now? Now you signed the settlement agreement. No alimony. No asset division. You keep your car, your personal belongings, and whatever's in your business accounts. I drain the pasta. The boys stay with me. You get visitation rights, but they're old enough to decide how much they want to see you. That's not fair. Fair would have been you being honest 3 years ago when you started cheating. Fair would have been you not lying about Jeremy. Fair would have been you treating me like a partner instead of a piggy bank. I plated the pasta. What you're getting is mercy, Diana. Take it. And if I don't, I turn to face her fully. Then I release the other recordings. The ones where you talk about forging my signature on loan applications. The ones where you and Victor discuss hiding assets in your sister's name. The ones that cross from divorce court into federal fraud territory. Her face went white. You're bluffing. Try me. I picked up 2 plates. Brandon, Zachary, dinner's ready. Diana watched me carry the food to the dining room, then quietly left through the front door. I heard her car start, then fade into the distance. Jeremy Wall showed up on a Saturday afternoon in early October. Brandon had invited him, told me 2 days before, asked if it was okay. I'd said yes without hesitation. He pulled up in a Ford F-150, well-maintained, but not flashy. Construction company logo on the door. He climbed out slowly, like he wasn't sure he had the right address. I opened the front door before he could knock. Jeremy, I said, extending my hand. He shook it, his grip firm but not aggressive. Marshall, thank you for letting me come. Boys want to see you. That's what matters. I stepped aside. Come in. He was 44, but looked older, the kind of wear that comes from physical labor and hard years. But his eyes were clear, and when Brandon and Zachary came down the stairs, the expression on his face was pure relief. Dad, Brandon said, then caught himself. I mean, Jeremy. Sorry, that's... It's okay, Jeremy said quietly. Marshall's your dad. I'm just glad to see you. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Zachary broke the tension by sticking out his hand. I'm Zachary. I don't remember you, but Brandon says you've been trying to find us. Jeremy shook his hand, then Brandon's. For 15 years. Your mother. He stopped, glanced at me. They know, I said. About the restraining order threats. About the letters you sent that got returned. They know all of it. Jeremy's jaw tightened. I never wanted to abandon you. I need to know that. I made mistakes when you were little. I was drinking too much, wasn't reliable. But I got sober 10 years ago. Got my life together. And I tried to find you. But Diana made it impossible. We believe you, Brandon said. We saw the letters. The birthday cards. All of it. I left them in the living room and went to the kitchen, gave them space. Through the doorway, I could hear them talking, tentative at first, then more comfortable. Jeremy telling them about his construction business, his wife, their half-siblings. The boys asking questions, filling in 15 years of blanks. An hour later, Jeremy found me in my study. Marshall, he said from the doorway. Can we talk? Sure. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat down, hands clasped between his knees. I owe you an apology. For what? For not fighting harder to be in their lives. For letting Diana win. He looked up. But more than that, I owe you thanks. You raised my sons when I couldn't. You gave them stability, education, love. That's more than I had any right to ask for. I didn't do it for you. I said honestly. I did it for them. I know. That's why I'm thanking you. He rubbed his face. Look, I'm not trying to replace you. I can see how much they love you. But I'd like to be part of their lives, if that's okay. Not as their dad. You're their dad. But as someone who cares about them. I studied him for a long moment. You hurt them once. By not being there. Even if it wasn't entirely your fault. Don't hurt them again. I won't, he said firmly. I swear to God I won't. Then you're welcome here anytime, I said. The boys can decide what kind of relationship they want with you. I won't stand in the way. He stood up, extended his hand again. You're a better man than I would have been in your situation. I shook his hand. I'm just trying to do right by them. Same as you are now. After he left, Brandon came into my study. That was weird but good, he said. Yeah. He seems like he's got his life together now. Brandon sat on the edge of my desk. But Dad, you're still my dad. That doesn't change. Something tight in my chest loosened. Good to know. Mom called me yesterday. Asked if I'd testify that you were manipulating us. What did you say? Brandon smiled. I said you taught me to think for myself. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Diana signed the papers on a gray November morning in a conference room that smelled like old coffee and defeat. Her new attorney, the fourth one she'd hired after Victor's disbarment, sat beside her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I sat across the table with my counsel, watching her hands shake as she initialed each page. No alimony, no asset division. She kept her car, a leased Lexus that would be repossessed in 3 months when she couldn't make payments. She kept her personal belongings, her failed podcast equipment, and roughly $11,000 in her business account. Everything else, the house, the investment properties, the offshore accounts, the company I'd restructured, stayed completely out of her reach. The boys' trust funds remained intact, with me as trustee for Zachary until he turned 21, and Brandon having immediate access to his now that he was 19. The terms hadn't changed. If Diana ever attempted to manipulate them for financial gain, the funds would dissolve into scholarship programs. "This is robbery," Diana said quietly, pen hovering over the final signature line. Her attorney, a tired-looking man named Paul Hendricks, put his hand on her arm. "Ms. Kincaid, we've been over this. You signed away your claims 3 years ago. Fighting this will cost you everything you have left. I was coerced. You were texting about a reality show while you signed," I said calmly. "We have the phone records. Time-stamped." She looked up at me, then really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. "When did you become this person?" "When you stopped being my wife," I said. "When you decided I was just a resource to be exploited." She signed the final page, the pen pressing so hard it nearly tore through the paper. "There's one more thing," my attorney said, sliding another document across the table. "The house on Riverside Drive." Diana frowned. "What about it?" "Mr. Kincaid purchased it 3 weeks ago. The property that's currently being rented month to month." My attorney looked at Diana. "You're the tenant." Her face went white. "You're my landlord." "The property management company is," I corrected. "They handle everything. But yes, technically, you're paying rent on a property I own. Market rate. $1,500 a month. It's all in the lease agreement you signed. You set this up. I bought a property at a foreclosure auction," I said. "You chose to rent it. That's not setting you up. That's just irony." Diana gathered her papers with shaking hands. "I hate you. You've mentioned that," I said. "But hatred doesn't change the signatures on these documents." She left without another word, Paul Hendricks trailing behind her like a funeral director after a difficult service. My attorney waited until the door closed. "That was brutal, Marshall." "That was necessary," I corrected. "She spent 15 years lying to me, lying to my sons about their father, and planning to strip me of everything I built. What she got was merciful compared to what she deserved. The boys okay with all this. They chose to stay with me. Brandon's thriving at Penn State. Zachary's talking about studying architecture." I stood up, gathering my own papers. "They're building a relationship with Jeremy, their biological father. It's awkward, but it's genuine. That's more than Diana ever gave them." "And you? How are you doing?" I thought about that for a moment. "I'm free. For the first time in years, I'm actually free." 14 months later, the house felt different. Lighter somehow, like someone had opened windows that had been sealed shut for years. Brandon graduated from Penn State with honors, landed a job at a logistics firm in Philadelphia. Zachary was finishing his junior year, his portfolio of architectural drawings spread across the dining room table most weekends. Jeremy came by once a month, taking the boys to baseball games or just sitting around talking about construction and life and all the years they'd missed. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was honest, and that mattered more. I'd started dating someone, Ellen, a forensic accountant I'd met through work. She was 52, divorced, no kids, and refreshingly direct about what she wanted from life. We took things slow, had dinner twice a week, talked about everything from international tax law to vintage cars. She understood that I came with baggage, 2 sons who'd always be my priority, a failed marriage in the rearview mirror, and a carefully constructed fortress around my assets. She didn't ask me to tear down that fortress. Just open the gates sometimes. "You trust her?" Brandon asked one Sunday afternoon. We were in the garage, working on the Mustang together. It was finally running after 2 years of restoration. "Getting there," I said, adjusting the timing belt. "Trust takes time to rebuild." "Mom asked me for money last week," Brandon said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I looked up. "What did you say?" I said no. Told her I'm saving for a house down payment, and she should have thought about her future before she blew up her present. He wiped his hands on a rag. She hung up on me. You okay with that? Yeah, I feel bad for her sometimes. But then I remember she lied about Jeremy for 15 years. That she would have taken everything from you if she could have. He met my eyes. You taught me that actions have consequences. She's living hers. Zachary came out of the house, phone in hand. Dad, the Grant Educational Foundation just funded 3 more scholarships. They want to do a press release with your name on it. The foundation I created, the one that held all the assets Diana thought she'd get in the divorce, had grown substantially. It funded scholarships for adult learners, people trying to start second careers, single parents going back to school. Everything I'd built now helped people who actually needed it, instead of funding someone's betrayal. Tell them to keep my name out of it, I said. The work matters more than the credit. That evening, Ellen came over for dinner. She brought wine and told stories about a client who tried to hide assets in cryptocurrency. Zachary showed her his architectural drawings, and she asked smart questions that made him light up with pride. After dinner, we sat on the back deck, watching the sun set over the property I'd bought outright. No mortgage, no liens, no joint ownership to complicate things. You've built a good life here, Ellen said quietly. Rebuilt, I corrected. There's a difference. She took my hand. Better foundation this time. I thought about Brandon and Zachary choosing to stay with me. About Jeremy getting a second chance at fatherhood. About Diana living in a rental property I owned, paying me $1,500 every month without knowing it. About the scholarship recipients whose lives were changing because I protected what I built instead of letting it be torn apart. Yeah, I said. Much better foundation. Ellen smiled. Good. Because I'm not interested in helping you build another one. Once was clearly enough. I laughed. Really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. Deal. Brandon came outside, beer in hand. Ellen, Dad's being modest. You should see the letters from the scholarship recipients. People crying because they can finally afford nursing school. Single moms going back for teaching degrees. It's actually pretty incredible. Your dad's full of surprises, Ellen said, squeezing my hand. You have no idea, Brandon replied, grinning. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere across town, Diana was probably scrolling through social media, seeing other people's happy lives and wondering how hers had gone so wrong. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't think about her much at all. I'd moved on, built something better. And this time, the foundation was solid enough to last.